Hello, welcome to the webinar on considering medical school. My name is Carrie Latham. I'm a career counselor with the Student Success Center, and thank you for joining us.
I'm Rachel Nelson. I also work with Carrie in the Student Success Center as one of the events and communications specialists. We're just going to give everyone just a minute or so longer just to join us online, and then we'll get started. All right, and for those that just joined us, welcome to Considering Med School. Carrie, would you like to say go into the introduction, or do you want me to go through the housekeeping items first?
Yeah, sorry, I sort of did an introduction, but not enough people were on in the beginning, so I'll do it again. Yes, welcome everyone. My name's Carrie Latham. I'm a career counselor with the Student Success Center, and I'll be taking you through the presentation on considering medical school. And Rachel is here to help me make sure everything goes very smoothly. Yeah.
So today we just have a few housekeeping items to go through. We will be using the Q&A feature, so if you want to have that open, and we're going to leave time at the end to address some of these questions, but we recommend just kind of listening through the presentation, and then we'll probably leave 10 to 15 minutes to go through these closer to the end. Just want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the Further Education Events page. It'll probably be there by the end of next week. We will be also sending a copy of the session, so a copy of the presentation, and that will be emailed to you by the end of the week. And if you have any technical issues or questions, please use the chat and we'll do our best to try and problem solve those for you.
Okay, so ready to get started then. As I said, welcome everyone. I'm not used to doing webinars, so this is kind of new for me. When I've done them in the past, they've been sort of smaller groups. So I'm really looking forward to all your questions at the end so I can kind of interact with you a little bit more. But anyways, welcome. So the main thing about applying to medical schools is for the Ontario applications, it's a centralized system. So really encourage you to go to that website, the Ontario Medical School Application Service, and they have a great summary of all that you need to know about the application. But I'll take you through some more, but I do recommend that you go through it on your own as well. For the centralized application in Ontario, the applications open up in July and then they'll close in September. So thinking about your summer as the sort of the cycle for when you apply. If you are considering out of school, out of province schools, then you'll need to apply directly to those schools. And they have varying timelines too with the application deadlines and their processes. So you'd have to inquire with each school for the out of province programs. Okay. So when you're putting in your application for the Ontario Medical Schools, part of the OMSAS application, so Ontario Medical School Application Services application, you will be required to upload your transcripts. You're going to have what's called an autobiographical sketch. There's going to be confidential assessment forms that you'll need to submit, and there'll be interviews. And I'm going to go through all of these in more detail in this presentation. Some schools will require some course prerequisites, some ask for MCAT, some ask for CASPER, and some ask for admissions questions, and I'll go through that. Also, when you're thinking about the application, do look at any of the special application streams or admissions requirements for different representative groups or locations. Some schools have some different streams, or they have some preferred geographical sort of where you live as another criterion. Okay, so the autobiographical sketch. This is going to be a listing of all the activities that you've completed since the age of 16, and you're going to organize them into these categories of employment, volunteer, extracurricular, awards, accomplishments, research, and other. And for all these activities, you're going to be required to submit verifiers, so the name, address, phone number, and email that can verify that you have completed these tasks. So when you're thinking about all your categories and what you're going to be doing, universities want to see how applicants will choose to present their information, so you use your own discretion. So this is where it's really important to go into each school's website and look at their requirements. So what's Queen's looking for, what's U of T looking for, because you will notice a language there. So for example, Queen's specifies very clearly that we're looking for quality, not quantity. U of T sort of talks about how they're looking for a narrative. How are you going to present yourself? What's the story that you're showing? So how do these categories sort of share your story? So when you're thinking about, these categories are what you're going to put into it, think about what the schools are sort of looking for, okay? And what's the story that you want to present. For the research component, U of T mentions that they are happy for you to share any kind of experience that's related to research, whether it's presentations or posters or publications. And it's your discretion whether you put that, say you did have a volunteer position as a research assistant, it's your discretion whether you put that under the volunteer or you put it under research. Okay, but do check again with each school and what's the language and how do they talk about this aspect of the application.
Carrie, there's just a question regarding that slide.
Oh, sure.
So someone's just asked if the verifier is not, it's no longer working at the volunteer place, is that still okay to provide the address of the hospital, for instance, and list them?
You will need to find someone that still can verify that you were there. So you'd have to, if it's like a volunteer coordinator, maybe there's some records there, or if it's a human resource department. So you still do need to verify, have someone that can say, yes, I verify that they did this activity. If it's a supervisor that's no longer there, then you might need to sort of track them down and see if they're still willing to be a verifier for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, is it? Yep. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah.
Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah. Where was I? Yes. Okay. So the confidential assessment forms, these are basically what they call your referees, your references. Sometimes we say, oh, you need references. So for the med school applications, they do ask that you include one that will be academic or employment related, one that should be personal, non-academic. However, they're very clear about not having anyone that knows you, like, so no family members, no close friends. So this personal is more about you as sort of a personal characteristic, sort of personal character reference. And then one can be of your choosing. So you could have two academics or employment. So that's there. And then, so these referees, they should be able to speak about your suitability for being a physician, as well as your competency and attributes for the profession. So be able to evaluate you on your communication skills and your empathy and your problem solving and your ethics. So it's really important to get to know, thinking about who will be a strong advocate for you for your application. And what happens with these confidential assessment forms is when you fill out your application, you will indicate your three references, their name, their email, and then this form will be sent to them sort of behind the scenes that they will then fill out confidentially and submit as part of your OMSAS application. So you really do need to make sure that these references are not just references, but they will speak very strongly about you as an applicant. Your academic records, you're going to have to submit your transcripts from all post-secondary schools. So if you started at college and transferred to university, or you took a course, maybe one course at another school, any post-secondary transcripts you will need to submit. And then here's a little bit of the GPA realities. I'm sure you've all heard it's very, very competitive to get into medical school. So I just wanted to share some of those realities of the marks. You can find these on their website too. You can kind of go and verify and keep yourself updated. but McMaster, the average accepted GPA was a 3.87. So on that scale, that's a 4.0 scale of looking at your marks. So when you think about McMaster, the equation is basically a 3.9 is considered an A on the McMaster scale, okay? And a 3.7 is considered an A minus. So really, when you're looking at those marks, U of T, Western, Queens, you're really looking at fairly solidly getting those A's and A pluses. However, don't panic. Each school does have their own way of calculating their GPA. So they have what's called weighted GPAs, and they have some variations that you should check out. And this is also where it becomes very important for you to be thinking strategically about your application to med school, because maybe that first year there was some adjustment that needed to be happen, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that this is, med school's just out already for you, but you might want to then look at the schools where that first year mark is maybe not as important. So for example, Western University, they like to see 2 solid good years is what they evaluate you on. McMaster is a cumulative, so every mark that you've ever taken, whether it's part-time or full-time, gets calculated. So again, each school has their own way of evaluating it, but I also just wanted to share that even with their different weighting systems and how they evaluate your GPA, the realities are that you should still be thinking about A's and A pluses. Okay. Academic requirements. So doesn't matter what program, whether you're in a science, humanity, health science, any undergraduate, any discipline is fine. McMaster, U of T, Queens, and Ottawa, they'll accept you after 3 years of undergraduate studies. So that means you can begin to apply in the beginning of your 3rd year. So it's a little bit tricky because the application would be sort of the summer, basically the summer after your 2nd year and the beginning of your 3rd year is when the earliest you could apply to these schools. And then for Western and Northern Ontario School of Medicine, they do want a 4-year degree. So you can only apply to those in your 4th year or after, obviously. And only Ottawa and U of T have specific course requirements, prerequisites. So if you're thinking about your course selection, and I know a lot of people are concerned about organic chemistry, do look at the schools and verify which ones. So just and you, again, strategically, if you need to take this, and also when in your course selection you might want to take it. Because going back to that, how schools calculate their GPA, some schools, like I said, McMaster will look at all schools, all courses, whether you take it in the summer or the spring, doesn't matter, or the school year, whereas other schools will only look at your marks, full-time marks from September to April. Okay, so I really encourage you to go do your own research on this. And go to each school to clarify if you have any questions about your course requirements, full-time, part-time status. If you are thinking about maybe doing a 5th year to help you kind of get your marks up a little bit higher or build some more experience, do check with the schools too about how they evaluate that, and then co-op terms. So I know there's a lot of variations. It's not usually a straight path to med school. It's really great to sort of gather the information and just realize again that there might be a bit of a strategy to maybe you might be a great applicant for a few schools, but just not 1 or 2 others, and that's okay. Okay, the MCATs, you will need to think about writing the MCATs if you want to apply to Queens, U of T, Western, and McMaster. So this is quite a lengthy exam that you'll be completing, that goes into these categories of understanding biological and biochemical foundations, chemical and physical foundations, psychological, and then the critical analysis and reasoning skills, or the CARS, is what McMaster is only interested in. So for this, you have to pre-register, go directly to the MCAT site. You'll register, and there's lots more information about the MCATs. There gives you a little bit more of an overview. And if you're wondering about you know, prep courses and things like that. I find if you go to some of the student clubs, they're usually the best people to tell you, because they might have had firsthand of what was helpful or what wasn't helpful about those prep courses. Just be careful, they are expensive. And so Khan Academy, KHAN Academy, right now they have a free MCAT prep course. I think it's going to be running out though. So I always find that that's a great site to go to. If you're not sure about whether, you know, whether you're prepared enough to take the MCAT, it's a great way to go and review what the MCAT content is all about. And that might give you an idea of whether you feel like you need to take a prep course. Okay. Okay, the Casper. This is a newer thing that's been evolving over the last couple years. McMaster started having this as a requirement, and then Ottawa and Queen's have now sort of added that onto their requirement as well. So Casper, it's called Computer-Based Assessment for Sampling of Personal Characteristics. So these are going to be like 10 or 12 scenarios that you're going to do on a computer, and they're timed responses. And then those results will get sent to those schools, and it's part of your evaluation. So you do need to register through the Casper site, but there's a specific time when you can do it. So you'll need to do it in the fall of the application. So usually you'd apply to OMSAS, and then you'd have to sort of register for very specific dates, and then those will get released to your school. Okay, there's nothing that you can really. I think you can prepare for the Casper more by going through maybe some ethical questions, because some of the scenarios might be ethics questions. And I think one of the clubs, I think MAC Ethics, I think they do a nice job too of helping you, you know, just kind of give you practice on some ethic questions. There's also another club now that I'm thinking about it. I think it's McMaster Health and Medicine Society. They're another great club too that you can kind of maybe hear a little bit more about some other you know, resources and tips. Okay, so that's the Casper. And then some schools will also need a written component. So U of T, Northern Ontario School of Medicine, awesome, and Western. So in addition, they will also ask you to, so U of T wants you to write about 3 of your autobiographical sketch experiences. And then they want you to sort of talk about those experiences in relation to what they call their clusters, which are these competencies that they really want to see in their applicants. And then they also have 3 questions that you will respond to, and those questions change every year. NAWSM also has some supplemental questions that you'd have to respond to. And then Western has more recently, in 2018, they added what they call abbreviated autobiographical sketch. And again, this is you talking about your experiences in relation to Western's core values. Okay, and then all schools will require interviews. So the dates usually range anywhere from February through to April. So again, thinking about when you're applying, you'd be applying, opening up the application in the summer, getting yourself all ready, making sure you've got your MCATs done. Final, you know, application goes in. If there's Casper that is required, those will probably happen in October. And then you can start to, in January is when you'll start to hear whether you've been invited for an interview. And then those interviews will happen in February and April. So really important to think about this process when you are trying to decide about when I should apply, thinking about, you know, what you're going to be doing in this winter, February through April, because in addition to your studies, you're going to also be having to be thinking about preparing for interviews, maybe going to certain like going to Ottawa and how do you get there, and sort of travel arrangements as well. So these interviews will be generally community members, faculty, staff, or medical students. And it is a key part of the application. You've gotten yourself this far, the interviews are super important. And they just want to get to know you, but they'll also evaluate you a little bit on your motivation and your fit for the program and the profession. And the format really does vary. McMaster has been using what's called the multiple mini interview, or the MMI, for a long time. And again, more schools are sort of adding on to that. So Queen's, I think, offers, it's an MMI plus a short panel Western is your standard panel interview, and then U of T offers has something called modified personal interviews, which is 4 separate mini interviews of 10 minutes each. Okay, so interviews will be part of it. Okay, so I want to move on now a little bit about thinking about how to prepare. So that kind of went through all the application pieces of applying to Ontario. Oh, you have a question?
Hey, Carrie, just before you move on, I just wanted to let you know we are about 20 minutes in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Keeping me on track. Appreciate that. Okay, I will speed up. Because I do want to get to all your questions as much as possible. Okay, so the competencies, the CanMed roles, make sure you understand these. These are the competencies that have been developed for when you finish your medical training. However, they are very much used as a way to evaluate whether you have some of these competencies started before you enter med school. So you can use these competencies as a way to think about how do you develop yourself now to be ready for med school. So building yourself as a collaborator, as a manager, as a professional, sort of all those, not necessarily you're supposed to be the medical expert now, obviously, but all those competencies on the outer circle. So do look into the CanMed role framework, get to understand them, and then think about how you can develop yourself in these realms. Okay. Some other qualities that are expected. So with the CASPER for some of the schools, they're going to be assessing you again on collaboration and communication, empathy, ethics, motivation, resilience. The Western's MD program, they're looking for, again, teamwork, collaboration, however you want it. That's so important in the healthcare professions. But also you can see some of those other characteristics they're looking for. And again, self-directed learning. So you can think about researching the schools and looking at these competencies from the CanMeds will really help you to think about how do I make myself sort of the best candidate possible. But it's also really all meant for you to be successful too. So it's not just about getting into med school, but it's also so that you can be successful in the profession, as these are important skills and qualities to have. So what to expect? I know everyone, there tends to be a goal on like, let's get to med school, let's get to med school, that's the goal. But I just want to talk a little bit about, are you sure you want what comes next too? So in your undergrad studies, it's a lot of dedication, academics, community involvement, paid, unpaid work, it's a lot. But once you get into med school, it's 3 to 4 years. The first 3 years, because MAC has a continuous, it's a 3-year program, but it's continuous, there's no breaks. But generally in the first and second year is what we call your pre-clerkship. And the pre-clerkship is going to be even more intense than your undergrad years. So really encourage you to make sure you get your study skills, your academic skills, and how to self-manage under, in control and sort of feeling good, so that when you do get to those first years of med school, you've got some systems in place for yourself and some supports. Then there's the clerkship years. That's sort of where you're sort of in the hospital. And then in your final year, you'll be applying for residency placements. So again, this is another competitive application process where now you're competing for these residency placements. And then the residencies and specializations would be either 2 to 5 years, depending on your specialization. And also during your medical study, you will be then also having to write what's called Medical Council of Canada exams. So there's still more exams to be done and still more sort of applications and competitive process. I'm saying all this not to scare you, but hopefully just to sort of let you know that it is sort of definitely a commitment. And then, so if you want to learn a little bit more about, the specialties and the residency matching system, here are some good resources for you. The Association of Faculties of Medicine of Canada, that's a great site that talks a little bit more about costs and funding, which I didn't talk about in this session. So do recommend going there if you have some questions about fees and costs and how to manage it. Going abroad, I know a lot of students also think about, well, because it's so competitive in Canada and Ontario, maybe I can go abroad. If you are thinking about that, really encourage you to do your research. And the Health Force Ontario, that website that I have down there, they are an organization that will, they look at foreign trained healthcare professionals, and then they help them with what do you need to do to get settled here in Ontario. So I encourage you to go and talk to them and get their advice and suggestions as well. But I do encourage you to do your research. And here's some resources to help you with that. If you're applying to American schools, that's also another centralized application, and that's the American Medical School application. Again, if you go to that site, it has lots of details and information about what that might look like. And just to finish off, if you are, if you're just considering med school, not sure, or looking for some backup plans, or just the strategy of how do I kind of get there, at the Student Success Center, we do have career counseling services as well as career planning support. So we have a course called Career Planning Essentials. I highly recommend it. You can register through Oscar Plus, mcmaster.ca. The website's there under the events section. And there's just a little promo for it. We also have individual career counseling available. That will be with myself and some other career counselors that we have in our office. And you can look for the career and further education planning sites, or we have shorter little consults as well. And then we also have virtual career drop-ins. These are very short text-based, so this might be even after today. If I don't get to all of your questions, feel free to come to the drop-ins, and we have career counselors on that can maybe address some of the shorter questions. Okay, and there's a little promo. Some other tools, highly encourage you just to go to our website, studentsuccess.mcmaster.ca. Under the career section there, I've got some tools and some other supports for you if you're thinking about exploring other career options, or just sort of making sure you have everything that you need to plan your career. Digital challenge cards, if you see that on our website, highly recommend it. Some academic supports too, because the grades are really important, as well as managing your time. Highly encourage. We have wonderful people at our academic skills coaches and writing supports, all here to help you be successful academically. And finally, at the end, we can get to the questions now. Thank you for your patience. Okay.
Hi, Carrie. So we've got quite a few questions here,
Okay.
but we'll make our way through them.
Okay.
So we had a few questions about the application process. So someone's asked, will the medical schools verify every single one of my activities? Is that why they need a verifier for each?
Yeah, so it's going to be, it could be random, like they could choose. So I don't necessarily know if they go through every single application, but you have to make sure that if you get selected and they randomly are checking that it's there. So you don't want to disqualify yourself based on that.
Thank you. Do all schools require references?
Yes.
Need all three?
Sorry?
Do all schools require references? Need all three?
Yes. Yeah. For Ontario, yes.
Can you give an example of a personal reference, not a family member?
That could be, it could be anything that's maybe like volunteer, like where you've been sort of volunteering with someone and they've been seeing you sort of doing, how you've been engaging with sort of like maybe you're at a senior care center and you've been working closely. It could be maybe a neighborhood friend, or maybe you've been helping someone in the neighborhood, and they could be a reference for you that way. So the references generally, like, you do want them to be able to speak highly about your ability to be a doctor. They are going to evaluate you on whether, do you recommend this person to be a doctor? So you do want them to be able to say enough about you, and you want those references to be able to talk about your qualities as well. So, how are you with communication and collaboration? You saw all those qualities up there. So you want them to be able to evaluate you and be like a credible, strong reference for you.
Due to COVID, a lot of volunteering, research, and employment opportunities have been limited. Has the medical school addressed any of these, any changes in requirements due to this issue?
They've made some adjustments in regards to the mark. So some schools, in regards to what happened last term, the winter 2020 term, I know U of T is not looking at the marks from that term. And I think a few other schools too have made some adjustments as well as how they evaluate the marks from that term. But in regards to the other requirements, no, I haven't seen anything, at least from my research.
Is there a way to calculate the weighted or cumulative GPAs?
Yeah, so if I would recommend you, it'll be well worth your while just to go to each school, or go to the OMSAS site. Really, they've got it really nicely laid out there. So go to the OMSAS site first. Look, it gives you a listing of each school, and then it tells you the GPA section. It's got a nice summary of what they're looking for in the GPA section. But then also go directly to the med school's website. And I find under the FAQ section, they usually have some really great resources there and some more detail about how to calculate your GPA. Because you don't want to just calculate one GPA. You want to calculate what's your GPA for Mac, what's your GPA for Queens, what's your GPA for Western. Because each one looks at it a little bit differently. So it's not just like, here's my overall GPA, but for what school would it look like? Yeah.
How do summer courses work when you're calculating your GPA?
Yeah, so summer schools, some schools will only look at full-time, your full-time studies from September to April, and that's what they do to calculate it. And they will look at summer marks, not so much for the mark, but like if there's a prerequisite. So you needed to take organic chemistry and you took it in the summer, then they'll recognize that's a requirement. So that you got like a little check. Yes, they have the required prerequisite, but they may not necessarily calculate it as part of their GPA. However, for something like McMaster looks at cumulative GPA. So for McMaster, that summer course would be included as part of your GPA. Mm-hmm.
Does McMaster consider first year grades?
Yes.
Sorry,
and just to expand on that too. So in addition to each school having a slightly different way in which they look at your GPA and what marks they're looking at, and they also have different selection processes. So how they look, like how important the marks are, how important different aspects of that application also varies. So for example, Mac is very big on their CARS results. So the MCAT, that verbal reasoning section. So they look at 33, they'll look at how your marks are for that. They'll look at your marks are 33%, and then they'll look at the CASPER results as 33%. So they really are looking at those three portions, and then to see if you advance on to the interview side. So that's also important when you're looking at dive deeper into the schools, is to also look under what they say about their selection process. Yeah.
And do your third year marks matter if you apply in your third year?
So what they'll do is you'll be applying, they need to make sure that you still submit your marks. So like if you get invited for an interview, then they'll be kind of keeping your marks up to date. So you have to keep your marks kind of up there, but it's not necessarily going to be part of that selection factor, because they'll be, sort of inviting you in for an interview sort of before your full marks are completed that year. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that was great. Thanks, Carrie. Someone didn't take a full course load this year. They're just wondering if that could affect their acceptance chances.
So that would be thinking again strategically. So what a full course load can vary, like what school calls a full course load. So it might be good to just check with all the schools, and what I really recommend is just develop a spreadsheet and sort of gather the data and organize it. So for something like McMaster, it doesn't matter to them. Part-time, full-time, you can take it, it's all mixed in. Mac's easy that way, actually. It's all together. It's your cumulative marks, and it doesn't matter where it goes. But other schools are very particular about what is a full course load, and making sure that it's representative of the level. So, taking in your fourth year, you should be taking third and fourth year courses, not a whole bunch of first year courses. So each school, you do need to sort of investigate a little bit on that, and just pay attention to when they say full course load, what that means to that school.
Someone's asked, is it the same reference? Like they will tell med schools this person was good or not good, or is it just telling the schools you did what you said?
Oh, okay, yeah. So the verifiers are going to be on the autobiographical sketch, and so that's just sort of verifying, yes, they completed that. That's what the verifiers are. The referees, or we call them sometimes your references, are going to be 3 specific people that you identify as basically advocating for you, really. And you will then need to give the OMSAS application their names and their emails, and then the form will be sent to them sort of behind the scenes. So there's the verifiers for your activities, and then there's the references that are advocating for you. Yeah.
And are you allowed to guide the people who are filling out the references for you?
Yeah, actually, it's really helpful if you let them know what the schools are looking for. So for example, U of T really talks about making sure that they do talk about their clusters that are really important for U of T, and making sure that they can speak to those things. If you're applying to Western, it's probably important to make sure. So the thing is, you don't necessarily get one reference. The references are for all schools. So it's important to also make sure, that they are sort of broad in their sense, but definitely, yeah, give them some guidance as to what are the med schools looking for, especially if it's a reference that's maybe not really familiar with this system. They may not know how competitive it is and what they're supposed to be saying in it. So you're not supposed to necessarily do it for them, obviously, but definitely let them know, like, I'd really appreciate it if you can talk about this, or I did this, and this is kind of the things that they would like to hear about me. Mm-hmm.
And do you know how the new forms are different from the ones that they were using before?
Yeah, so what they've changed more recently is now it's going to be, instead of a letter that they write, there's now little sections that they will, like little boxes that they can fill in information. So, do they recommend that you'd be like a good physician, and then they can put in some information. And then there's some other criteria that they'll be evaluating you on, in comparison to others. So are you like, are you above average or where are you on these criteria? And then there's an opportunity for them to also fill out more details, like more of an open comment as well. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. And when do you recommend writing the MCAT?
Yeah, so I think a lot of students write it in the summer just because they're not in school, but you can write it throughout the whole year. There's lots of opportunities to write it. So I think typically most students find that they will study in the summer, write it in the summer, and then continue on with their schools. It fits with the system. You do need to have them, write them and then have the results so that you know whether it's worthwhile to apply, because some schools, I think Western and U of T has a minimum cutoff. So if you don't meet their minimum requirement for the MCAT, then it's no point applying to U of T. So it's good to make sure you have the results, make sure they're there and they're in time for the application. So you do need to think about that end of September deadline, and making sure that the results come in by then. And then it's really up to you when you feel like you're ready to apply to med school. So, whether you want to wait until, your 4th year, 5th, or after, or a lot of students that are super keen will do it sort of, after their 2nd year will be their first attempt. So if they do want to apply in their 3rd year, then they're ready. If not, after your 3rd year, so that then you can apply in your 4th year. And but it's up to you. And then again, or if you want to wait till you finish your school, you're all 4 years, and then do it after your 4 years, and then you can apply sort of post-degree as well. Yeah.
And when should students complete the CASPER test?
Yeah, so the CASPER for the Ontario med schools, those are going to be very specific test dates that they are will be done in the fall of the year that you apply. So it's nothing that you do prior to the application. It's only during the year that you will put in your application. And then there's so you finish your application at the end of September is the deadline, and then there'll be some test dates to do the CASPER in October. Mhm.
I heard NOSM has preference for Northern Ontario students. Is it hard for students at McMaster and other Southern Ontario students to get in?
Yeah, it is because they have a mandate to make sure that they're training health professionals to service the North. So their criteria for making sure students that are interested in their program are also very much interested in, working in the North and Ontario area. So unless you have some connection to the North, like maybe you grew up there or it is difficult, but also it's a smaller school. But if you are interested in that school, it's also a problem-based learning approach to medicine, very much like McMaster. So there might be sort of the style of it or the importance of like what you're going to get taught there from other schools. I would just inquire with them directly about sort of if you don't fit some of their, I guess, their preferred profile, you might just want to inquire. Mm-hmm.
And how common is it to do a 5th year for medical schools at McMaster?
Yeah, a lot of, I think continuing your education is a very common. We hear it in the Student Success Center a lot, is sort of people thinking about, what else can I do? Sort of maybe it's a next step after their degree. They apply to med school, they're not successful, then they're thinking about, yeah, should I do a 5th year? Is it my marks that need to be improved on? So it's really about thinking, okay, what of my application to med school should I be improving on? For some, it's just maybe redoing the MCAT. For others, maybe they felt like they haven't had enough experiences and life experiences, and maybe it's just building up more of that experiential piece is what they feel is missing. But for those that feel like it's the marks that really are the one that can really kind of make their profile or make their application a little bit stronger next time, then yeah, people do think about doing a 5th year. And then for that, I would just, again, make sure you check with the schools to make sure how they look at that 5th year. Some schools are like, sure, school. Some might say, no, we need to make sure it's still full time. Others might say it needs to be in a program. So just coming back as a continuing student is fine for some schools, but not for others. So just do your research on that if you are thinking of that as a strategy.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about what the residencies are?
The different kinds? Is that, yeah. I would go to that site. That's really the residency. So I'm going to go back. That one is a really nice, where was that I gave you that? That's this one, the Canadian Medical Association. I would really highly recommend going to that one. They has really nice profiles on all the Canadian specialties. Yeah. Go back to my final page here. Yeah.
All right, Carrie, I think we still have another 10 questions or so to go through. I know we're getting close to the time. Are you okay to keep going for a little bit?
Yeah, I am. I feel bad though for people that maybe need to go, or so maybe a few more, and then for those, maybe Rachel, if you can, I can maybe grab or maybe I'll have people email me. I'm not sure if people are how we're going to manage those last ones, but yeah, let's see how far we can get. A few more.
Okay, sounds good. Can you demonstrate the CanMed's framework characteristics through mainly non-health medicine related activities, demonstrating collaboration through involvement with a debate or mock trial team?
Oh, yes. I'm so glad. Yes. With the big thing about developing yourself for med school is it doesn't have to be all medically focused. So McGill actually, I meant to say it, but they have a lovely profile of what they're looking for. And they talk about, we're just looking for people with well-rounded, they're involved, they're engaged. So if it's arts or theater or technology, it's sort of really allow yourself to really develop and explore your interests, which can be varied and still be medicine. So it doesn't have to be narrow. All your experiences do not have to be narrowly focused on volunteering in a hospital, for example, or doing research in a lab. Please think about developing all those competencies through the areas that are interesting for you and that kind of, because that will help you to showcase that narrative that they want to see. Who are you? Where are your passions? Where are your interests? Where have you developed yourself?
How important is experience in medical settings? For example, volunteering at a hospital or long-term experience. Would lack of involvement in these activities be a downside on an application? Is this type of volunteering, or at least some extent, expected?
It goes back again. They don't necessarily prescribe what your activities are supposed to be. But you know, just when you think about why you're interested in medicine and thinking about how it could help you, you know, so engaging in patient care or seeing how a hospital works, that's all good for you, and for your sense of whether this is the right thing for you. But they don't prescribe what those volunteer activities are supposed to be. So I think it's your discretion.
My program considers 4 course full course load, but most schools consider 5. Would that disqualify me? So I feel like you already kind of covered this question, that they need to check,
yeah,
right?
And I think, yeah, I think any specific, I know it's, I would say 2 things to do after today's session, if you are, you're not scared off, is to go to the OMSAS site, look up the application, and I would just, you know, go through and highlight all the sections, organize it into a spreadsheet, and then put a section for questions. So how does, how does Queens look at full-time study? I want to know that. So if you can't find it on the OMSAS, then I would go directly to the school's webpage, check out the FAQs. If you still can't find it or it still feels vague, then what you want to do is you want to email the admissions email, so med school admissions email, and just ask for clarification there. So 3 things that you can do to kind of get those questions that are maybe very specific to you addressed. Yeah. Okay, we got most of them, or?
Yeah, I'm just looking through if any of them are like more for the group.
Okay, yeah.
How long roughly does it take to get the MCAT results back?
Oh, I'm stumped on that one, actually. I don't know. Sorry, I'm not too sure. I'm wondering if you check the MCAT site, like when you investigate the registration and the dates, they might have some information on that site for you.
Yeah, I think most of them we've covered. I think for the questions that relate to your unique situation.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to go back to this. So the virtual drop-ins, please feel free if there's some questions that didn't get addressed, or after today you still have some questions, definitely welcome to use the virtual career drop-ins. They're available Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays from 1:30 to 4. First come, first serve basis, and they are text-based, but you can find the link. The link is here, but also if you go to the Oscar Plus events page, then you'll also be able to find it there. Okay, and then that way we can maybe address any other questions. But I do encourage you also to go directly to the school's website and the OMSAS site too. Yeah. Okay, we've done then, I think. If
yes.
Anyone's still left on. Well, thank you everyone for sticking around. If you stuck around for the questions, I hope it was helpful. And yeah, just connect with us at the Student Success Center. Happy to help, whether it's answering questions or guiding or exploring career options or helping you with your sort of academics so you can achieve your goal. Okay. And we have lots more happening around further education, so do check out our events page as well. Okay. Okay, bye now.
Thanks everyone, bye.